Hello, I'm Stephen Fagan, curator of the sixth floor museum at Dealey Plaza. Our institution's ongoing oral history project explores the history and culture of the 1960s, as well as the life, death, and legacy of President John F. Kennedy. This year, to celebrate Martin Luther King Day and Black History Month, we are pleased to present Voices from the Civil Rights Movement, a special series of recent oral history interviews with 1960s activists. In these intimate, detailed one-on-one conversations, an outstanding group of storytellers share powerful memories from several key moments of the movement, including the Montgomery bus boycott, freedom rides, the March on Washington, Mississippi Freedom Summer, the Selma to Montgomery March, and the Scope project of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. We hope that these remarkable, relevant stories will spark conversation and build bridges of understanding and communication between generations. Please keep in mind that these are full, free-flowing oral history interviews. In addition to moments of technical difficulties, there may be harsh language and graphic descriptions of violence. Viewer discretion is advised. If you or someone you know would like to share memories of the 1960s or articulate how President Kennedy has impacted your life, please contact us at oralhistory@jfk.org. We continue to record conversations year-round as part of this ongoing archival initiative, and we believe that everyone has a story. Thank you for joining us today, and we hope that you enjoy these voices from the civil rights movement. And ma'am, at the beginning of these, we always invite our guests to introduce themselves, if they would, with their full name, date and place of birth, and just a little background about your early life, please.
Oh, okay. Cheryl Janice Johnson is my name, born July 3rd, 1951 in Panola County, Batesville, Mississippi, which is northwest Mississippi. It's 57 miles south of Memphis, 1 hour north of Jackson. It part of the county, 25 miles west of the University of Mississippi. And part of my county is in hill country, what they call hill country in Mississippi, the rolling hills, and the other part of it is in the Delta. It's I describe it as like the gateway to the Delta. You know, it's right where the Delta began. So the community that I grew up in was really in the Delta, was considered a part of the Mississippi Delta. And I grew up on a farm, a family farm, that had been purchased by my great-grandfather, Lee Johnson, and he died, and my grandfather, Alfred Johnson, took over the farm and continued to make the payments on it. And my dad went into the military so that he could get an allotment to help the family pay for the farm, because they almost lost it a couple of times, and it was his allotment that helped save it. So we had a large farm that we grew up on, and it was all my family. And I lived in a community that was primarily Black. There were a few white people there, but it was mostly Black people. And they were all my extended family. They were either my grandparents, my aunts, my uncles, my great aunts, my great uncles, my first cousin, second cousin, third cousin, fourth. I mean, it was like everybody was related to everybody. And the other thing that was unique about it was that it was, they were all landowners, which was, I didn't think it was unique at the time when I was growing up. But in retrospect, I realized that it was a very unique situation to have that many Black people in one community who were all related to each other, who all purchased and owned their land. So we were pretty isolated because it was very rural at the time. There was one highway that ran near our community. It was called Highway 6, and that went straight into the Delta. Mississippi went straight into Clarksdale, Marks, Quitman County, all those places. So, but we were pretty close to Memphis, just 1 hour south of Memphis, and we grew cotton, corn. We grew our own food. We raised our own livestock. We had our pecan orchards. We had fruit trees. my dad was a hunter. He was a big sports person, so he hunted, and he really, we ate a lot of wildlife back then. He was a bird hunter. In fact, he was renowned for his hunting skills and the bird dogs that he owned. And people would come all the way from Memphis, actually, for my father to take them on hunting expeditions. And because he had that reputation. So I had five siblings. There were six of us, and we lived in a little 4-room shack, and that really had only like 2 bedrooms, really, and a kitchen for 8 people. We had one little back room that had a little rollaway bed in it that my parents would let out for my other 2 siblings to sleep on. But as my brother describes it this way, we were Poe with 26 O's. So, but we didn't think of ourselves that way. We grew up in a place where people loved us. They were affirming, they were encouraging, they had high expectations of us. I attended a Rosenwald school from grades 1 through 6, which was built by the people in my community. The Black people built the school for their children because during that time, Jim Crow era, apartheid era, we didn't have access to the public schools. So the Black people built the school with a small donation from the Rosenwald Foundation. And that's where at least 2 or 3 generations of people in my community were educated. All of the people who taught me were Black teachers, and they were all, many of them were related to me. They were my cousins. So it was a good place to grow up. I didn't think so at the time. I wanted to get away from there. And but as I said, it was a very affirming, very loving, very supportive community. And of course, the church was the center of our lives. It was where civic and religious and social activities occurred. Our idea of a vacation was Vacation Bible School. That was your vacation. So we went to church year round, and on Sundays we spent almost all day at church. And most of our social life occurred in the church, and also at the Rosenwald School. It was more than a school. It was really a civic center for many of the community activities, 4th of July picnics, PTA meetings, any kind of birthday parties, any kind of event that you wanted to have. It was usually at the Macedonia Rosenwald School. Is that helpful?
Oh, it's wonderful. I appreciate all the detail. Growing up in such a loving and protective environment, when and how did you become aware of the hatred and racism and prejudice that existed just on the other side of that family community you were in?
Yeah, we were in a little bubble, a little safe bubble with boundaries around it. And I can't say that the one thing I can say is that I don't ever remember my parents talking about white people or talking about racism. That was just not a part of what our life was about. Us. It had nothing to do with white people. And so they were rarely spoken of. But I was somewhat aware. I can remember some white man coming to our house one time, and I was out sweeping the porch off, and because it was stirring up so much dust, I had a rag wrapped around my head to keep the dust from getting in my hair. And I remember he came up on the porch and he made some snide remark to me that left me feeling like he had put me down. It was clear to me that what he said was a put down. But I just don't remember my parents having any discussions with us about, not with me, about white people or racism. We went to separate schools. It was as if it was just normal, and it never occurred to you that there was something abnormal about it or strange or different. I do remember one thing that stands out though in my mind, when I may have become aware of white people as being dangerous. And I went back in my mind and tried to figure out how old I was. And I think I was about 3 or 4. And then it was only in my adulthood that I connected that to Emmett Till's murder, because I was 3 when he got murdered. I kept thinking as an adult, why can't I remember Emmett Till's murder? Why don't I remember that? And I went back and calculated my age, and I was like, I was only 3 years old. That's why I don't remember it. But I remember an incident where there was one white family who lived somewhat down the road from us, and this young girl was a teenager, and there was like a store, a community store in our neighborhood. She had gone to the store, and she had to come back past our house to to get to her house. And she came onto our property, and she had some Hershey candy, and she gave it to my brother and I. She gave us a piece of Hershey candy, and my dad saw her giving it to us, and he rushed over to where we were, and he snatched the candy from us, and he literally cursed her out and told her not to ever give us anything again, and no food, and certainly no food. And I was just stunned by his reaction. I was trying to figure out what that was all about, but I went back in my mind as an adult and think that it was related to Emmett Till. Emmett Till had just been murdered. And my father was like being, all Black people in that community were on like high alert and being highly cautious. And so, from that experience, I internalized something along the lines of like, white people may be dangerous, but as far as other things, I just don't recall. The only other thing that I can remember in my mind is whenever my parents spoke of Senator Stennis and Eastland from Mississippi, they always spoke disparagingly of them, because that old Stennis and that old Eastland, they would say, because they voted against anything that was going to help Black people really become true citizens in this country. They were against it. They were part of the Dixiecrats in the Democratic Party. And I do remember my parents speaking disparagingly of them. But I remember one time my dad he had to take cotton to the gin over in town to have our cotton gin at a cotton gin, and that was owned by a white man. And they got into an argument over something, and my dad took his knife out. He was getting ready to defend himself. And so, from that, I got that, white people were dangerous, But in terms of like us hating them, my parents never taught that. We were never taught that kind of thing.
You would have been about 8 to 9 years old when John F. Kennedy ran for president in 1960. Do you have any memories of that election?
I was 10.
Oh, okay. 1960. What memories do you have of that election?
I don't have any of the election, none at all. I was like, I think 7th grade or 6th grade. So I don't remember anything about him being elected. I remember after he got elected. I remember when he got assassinated. We were in class. I was in the 7th grade, 12 years old. And my teacher came in and said, President Kennedy was just killed. He didn't say assassinated. He said he was killed. And I was like, 12. I was trying to figure out what to make of it, But I do know that it was near Thanksgiving. And because 2 days later, we went home for Thanksgiving break. And I remember feeling very sad, not because I knew anything about President Kennedy, but just because a person had been killed. I felt very sad about it. And it felt like something very looming that just hung over the holidays, that it was just a very sad time because somebody had been killed, Not that I knew anything about President Kennedy or had any opinion about him, just that he was a president of the United States and somebody had killed him. And that was a very sad thing to think about.
Had your parents made reference to him similar to making references to Senator Eastland?
No, we did subscribe to the Memphis Commercial Appeal. That was a paper that came to our house every day. We raced to the mailbox to get it because the person who got it first could open it up and we would all get down on the floor and spread it out on our knees and elbows and read the comic strips. But I do remember just somewhere getting the feeling that my parents felt positive about him and that maybe he represented something. He represented someone who might do something good for Black people. But in terms of having a conversation about him, I don't remember us talking about him. Mm-hmm. We certainly may have, but it's not something that I remember. I just remember my parents, I had the sense that they were hopeful that something was going to change for Black people because he was president.
Just 2 months before the assassination, those 4 little girls in Birmingham, close to your own age, were killed in that church bombing. Do you remember hearing about that at the time?
I don't. And I was just stunned when I went back as an adult and found out about that. I just kept thinking, why don't I remember this? Why don't I remember this? And maybe the adults talked about it, but I just don't remember them talking about it, And we got the newspaper. So I know it had to be in the newspaper. And I know that they had to have read about it. And I probably read about it too, but I just, I couldn't remember.
Do you think your parents may have deliberately kept tragic news like that from you in order to keep you from becoming scared?
Yeah, I was thinking about that this morning as I was reading over your questions. I'm like, I think my parents just didn't tell us a lot of negative stuff because, again, they didn't want to upset us and have us walking around terrified, and scared to death. So I think in that way that our community was like a bubble, a safe place and a bubble that we were surrounded in. I think my parents probably avoided talking about, a lot of these things to us because we were so young, we were very young.
Mm-hmm. Now, during the Kennedy years, you went to a brand new segregated school built in order to keep you segregated. Tell me a little bit about going to that school and your memories of those facilities.
The school was called Westside Elementary, and it was, we were just so excited that we were going to get a brand new school. And it was on Highway 6. So you'd have to get on the highway to go there. And I don't remember who the land was purchased from, but it was a lovely school. Fortunately, I had a brother who took photographs of it, and I have some photographs of it before it just collapsed in on itself. But it was a very nice school. It was spanking brand new. It had a cafeteria. It had a kitchen, because at the other school that we attended, there was no cafeteria, there was no kitchen, there was no, it had indoor plumbing, indoor toilet. We had an outdoor toilet at the other school. We had to bring our own lunch at the other school, because if you didn't bring your lunch, you couldn't eat because there was no kitchen. So it had a kitchen, it had a cafeteria, It had a gym. It had it had indoor toilets, and it had a principal's office, and nice classrooms with brand new desk, and we had out back. We had a very large playground that we and on May Day we built a maypole and danced around the maypole. And we had none of that at our other school. It was all dirt. It was no grass anywhere. It was just all dirt and dust. And so at this school we had grass, that we could run and play on, and the facilities was all brand new. And all of the teachers from our Rosenwald school came to that school. But not only them, all of the other little feeder schools that were in church basements, Mason halls, other rundown, dilapidated buildings, all those schools were merged so that they all came to Westside Elementary. So I got to meet a lot of kids and make friends with a lot of kids who were not a part of my immediate community. And, they have remained lifelong friends, so there were a lot of new teachers and who came from all those other schools, as well as new kids that came from those schools. So our world expanded.
It's remarkable reading and hearing about this, that the state would spend that much money on such nice facilities, specifically to keep the races separated, in direct violation of the law. But you had a chance, I guess, after your freshman year going to an all-black high school, you had a chance for your sophomore year to go to the white school. Can you talk me through that a little bit in your decision-making process?
Well, the forms that came to our house were called freedom of choice forms, and they were actually anything but that. It's kind of like the double speak we have today. We have to wage war in order to have peace. So this choice thing that we even have now. So it was called freedom of choice, and it was a strategy by the white schools. And this occurred not only in my hometown. I'm reading several books now on that. One of them is called The Hardest Deal of All, and it's by Charles C. Bolton, The Battle Over School Integration in Mississippi, 1870 through 1980. It's an excellent book that described what actually occurred. And it was only through reading this book that I understand that was actually a strategy to prevent, to thwart the Brown versus the Board of Education. So the paperwork came to our house claiming, this is freedom of choice. You can, choose whether you want to go to the black school or whether you want to go to the white school. And you can only come to the white school, though, if they have courses that are offered there that are not offered at the black school. So this was a pretext that white people were going to, decide to come to the black school, leave their white school and come to the black school. We know that wasn't going to happen. So it wasn't really a choice that they were going to exercise. So, and they knew that most black people, because many of them lived on white people's plantations, were not going to choose to come to the white school, because if they made that choice, they were going to be expelled from the plantation, or so to speak, put out on the streets and made homeless. So, and some of them were. One of my classmates, actually, her family became homeless because she signed a freedom of choice form to say she wanted to go to the predominantly white school. And when their plantation owner found out, he came to their house and told them they had to leave. They couldn't stay there anymore. So by offering that to Black people, they knew that many Black people were probably not going to choose to come to the white school, but we did. And I don't remember having a discussion with my parents. They asked us, I think, probably what we wanted to do. And we said, go to the predominantly white school, because somehow we had internalized that they had more resources than we had at the school we were attending. So we filled the form out and waited to hear back. I chose, I selected that I was coming to the white school because they offered Latin, and that was something I was interested in, not knowing what Latin was, but I just said, I want to take Latin. They have it over there, so I want to take it. So my brother and I, we both said that we wanted to go over there, so to the white school. So in the fall, just before school started, the Black principal came to our house. We were out in the field chopping cotton, and he came out into the field where we were, and he seemed very alarmed that we had signed this freedom of choice form that we wanted to go to the predominantly white school. And he asked us, are you sure that's what you want to do? And we said, yes. And he seemed very, very frightened, actually, very frightened. And so he left. And when fall came, my brother and I, actually my brother and myself, but my sister had already gone the year before, because a part of the strategy by the local school boards, and I understand that this was a strategy. It was almost as if they all the white school boards from around the country went to the same meeting and came back home with the same manual. Because in reading this book by Charles Bolton, what I realized was that every Southern state that was opposed to Brown versus the Board of Education executed the same strategy, and that was to let the to do an incremental integration. First, let the younger kids come first. We'll do 1 or 2 grades each year until we finally get to the older kids. So this was an incremental thing. And the other strategy was the kind of like a 2-pronged strategy, was the freedom of choice movement, where you get this form and you sign it saying that you wanted to go to that school because they offered something that you didn't have at the Black school. And so we ended up going, and our parents supported us, in doing that. And it was very tense, and very scary. We rode the school bus. Our school teacher, her name was Miss Applewhite. She ran a farm, but she drove the bus during the daytime. And she assigned us seats and told us where we were supposed to sit. You have to sit here, sit right here to the right of me, or sit directly behind me. So we had assigned seats on the bus. And as my brother said, we were obedient children. And so we did what we were told. So, we rode the bus every day, and we got to school. And there were, I think, 5 or 6 other students who had also decided to do the same thing that we had decided to do. So there were about 6 or 7 of us the first year in high school. My 2 first cousins, Sharon K. Johnson and Madeline Carol Johnson, they also went that year as well, but they were like a couple of grades ahead of me. So they were in like their senior year. And I was in my sophomore year. So they graduated in 67. They were actually the first 2 African Americans to graduate from that high school. But it was very tense. And, we were a novelty. They were a novelty to us. We were a novelty to them. And we had some run-ins. I remember once I got up to go to get my pencil, sharpen my pencil or something. And when I came back to my seat, someone had spat in my seat. And I was very upset about it. So I confronted the person that I thought who had done it. I could have been wrong, but I just thought he did it. So I confronted him, and he denied that he did it. So we both ended up in the principal's office for a while, trying to settle the matter. And my cousins, they had situations where you know, because we had grown up in the Black community, our parents hadn't, as I said, I think really protected us by not telling us a lot of this stuff, because we weren't even familiar with a lot of derogatory terms that white people used to refer to Black people, like coon. We had no idea that that was a term that they used to, you know, make reference to us. So they were addressing us as coons. You know, when we would walk down the hallway, there's a coon, there's a coon. And my cousins, you know, not having been told that, they were looking around to see, they literally thought there was a coon in the building. So they had no idea that they were referring to them. So when they got home and their parents asked them, well, how was school today? And they said, it was okay, except they kept saying, there's a coon. And we kept looking for one and we didn't see one. So their parents burst out laughing and said, that's what they call Black people. And so we had no idea. So I think our parents just kept a lot of things, you know, from us in order to, you know, have us grow up with high self-esteem and confidence in ourselves and liking ourselves.
Since you were too young to participate in Freedom Summer in '64, but by the time you had this opportunity in the fall of '66 to go to a predominantly white school, did you see it as your own form of activism? Did you view it through that lens at the time?
No, not at all. And the Black people in the community were calling us oh, the word, I escaped the word escapes me right now. It'll come to me later. But trailblazers, that's the word, trailblazers. I didn't think of myself as a trailblazer. I didn't think of myself as doing anything grand or anything spectacular. We were just going to a school that we thought had more resources than we did, because they did. The school buses that took us to school would break down on the side of the road. You know, the school books that we got were old, the covers were falling off of them, pages were missing. We didn't have any lab equipment. The typewriters were raggedy and didn't work. So I was going because I thought, you know, I was thinking more of getting a better education. It had nothing to do with activism. Although there was one occasion when I was at the school that it was really a conscious effort on my part to resist something that was happening. They always played Dixie whenever we went to the gym for the basketball games and the cheerleading, you know, that occurred before they pumped the people up to play the games. They always played Dixie. And everybody would jump up and they would just become just ecstatic and clapping and stomping and yelling and screaming. And I made a conscious decision when that happened. I am not going to stand up. I am not going to sing this song. I am just going to sit and pray that nobody, you know, assaults me. So that was the only time I ever remember consciously making a decision to actually engage in an active form of resistance.
Now, you mentioned you referenced a few teachers, one who was quite kind to you and understanding, and you referenced another teacher who literally taught with his back to you. Can you give me a sense of the different responses you got from the educators there?
Well, most of my teachers, I'll say, they were indifferent. You know, like they weren't welcoming and they weren't hostile. You know, they were just indifferent. You know, they didn't go out of their way to acknowledge me or to say or do anything that was unkind or disrespectful. Except for Miss Anderson. Her name was Sadie Anderson. And she was, her husband owned a grocery store in town. And my grandfather and many of the Black people shopped at his grocery store. They gave their business to him. And she knew my grandfather because he did business with them. And she knew that we were his grandkids, because when we first arrived there, she said, are you Alfred's grandchildren? And I, are you Alfred's granddaughter? And I said, yes. So she knew who we were. And so she was always very respectful. She always, when none of my other teachers said hello or anything, she would always speak to me. She would always stop and ask how I was doing. Just, some recognition, some acknowledgement, and just, to say, how are you doing? Are you okay? And she always addressed me by my name. And I was not a student in Mr. Sissel class. He taught chemistry. I did not take that class. But my classmates who were say that he separated them. He put the Black students on one side of the classroom. He put the white students on another. And he turned his back to the Black students and he talked to the white students. And he acted like the white students weren't there. But he was not unique. That's in this book, The Hardest Deal of All. There are other students in other schools in Mississippi who are describing that it had that same exact experience. That's why I say, I think they must have gone to the same conference and left with the same playbook, because they were using some of the same tactics. So that happened to other students as well. And I was shocked to see that when I was reading his book. So that's the story that they share. I was not privy to that because I didn't go to his class, but we often laugh now when we talk about it. And we say, we wonder if Miss Anderson was really genuine, if she knew the value of $1, that she didn't want to lose the Black business that was coming to her husband's store. And so she was very civil to us, and so we laugh about that now, but I guess it doesn't matter because we happen to reap the benefit of her making us feel comfortable in a place where we felt unwelcome, uncomfortable, and unsafe. Just that small interaction with her. And she was like that with with all of the African-American students. Just that brief interaction with her during the course of the day provided some respite and some relief from the anxiety and the hostility that we were having to navigate, during the day.
And then there was a time when your brother was hit unprovoked on the school bus, and you came to his rescue that day, didn't you?
Yes, my brother got shoved in the hallways, and because the males they were much more aggressive. So usually we didn't have any trouble on the bus because Miss Applewhite assigned us our seats. We stayed there. We did get people throwing spitballs at us. But this one day, David Weeks, who lived on Highway 6, he decided that he was going to he got up to get off of the bus, and he decided he was going to punch my eldest brother, Michael, in the head and then jump off the bus. So he hit my brother in the head, and before he could get off the bus, my brother jumped up and punched him back. Well, the blows, were starting to exchange very rapidly. They were punching on each other. And I had a pair of brand new red shoes. I remember them because another white guy who rode the bus had made fun of me. I can't say what he said. I'll just say he said, "That end gal is sharp today, isn't she? She's got on a pair of brand new shoes." But anyway, I had those shoes on and I took them off, and I wasn't going to let David beat my brother up. So I took my shoes off and I just started landing blows on David wherever I could get one, in the head, on the back, on the neck, wherever I could land a blow on him, until the situation, he managed to get up and get away and scurry off of the bus.
That is a delightful image. You hitting that young racist boy with your red shoes. I loved reading about that.
My red shoes.
Now,
Yeah, after they had been made fun of.
now you had an issue when it came to your prom, and I'd like you to tell that story, because that's another instance where you were a little bit of an activist going to the principal. Tell me about that, if you would.
Yes, when my classmates tell me, and I don't remember this, but they said we all had to sell something, some candy or something. All the seniors had to sell something in order to raise the money for the prom. So we did what we were supposed to do. We sold whatever it was we were required to sell. And they put a list up on the bulletin board across from the principal's office, announcing, what the date of the prom was, and you had to sign your name on there. So we all went and signed our names, the Black students did. And so we noticed that, at least I noticed that right after we signed our names, the prom list was taken down. It disappeared. And then we heard that the prom was going to be held at a private facility, and it was going to be a private event. So we were like perplexed, like we knew what it meant. It meant that if it's a private event, you have to be invited, and you Black students will not be invited, because we would have been the first ones to attend the prom. So we went home and we told our parents what happened, that they were saying that the prom was going to be a private event. And we were upset, and my parents were upset. So they consulted Mr. Robert Miles, who had been a co-founder of the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party. And I believe he helped found the local chapter of the NAACP in our county. And he had also housed a lot of the Freedom Summer volunteers who came down that summer, and his house had been firebombed and shot into countless number of times. But he was the go-to person. We consulted with him, and he said, you have a right to go, you're entitled to go, and you're going to go. And so we made up our minds that we were going to go. We found out where it was going to be held, and all of us, put on our gowns and tuxedos, and we all got in the car and drove to this location, which is, it was near a reservoir. And they also have a golf course there, and kind of like John W. Cowell State Park Lodge was really like almost like a country club. And so we all arrived there, and it was very dark, and we strode across the parking lot, and we could hear the band playing and all the conviviality and people laughing and having a good time. So we strode up to the lodge, and I knocked on the door, and Mr. Sissel again opened the door. He cracked it just enough to stick his head through it. And I said, we're here for the prom. We're here for the prom. We're here to attend the prom. And he said very quickly, this is a private event. You can't come. You weren't invited. This is a private event, or something to that effect. And then he quickly slammed the door in our face. So we were all dressed up in our tuxedos and gowns. We weren't going to kick the door in and try to get in. So we did what we thought, all that we could do. So, we turned around and left and got in our cars and went back. Actually, we met up again later, and we all decided that we were going to go to another little town not very far from us, which was over in the next county, Quitman County. And there was a Black family that had a club, what we call a club. Some people may call a juke joint, but they had one of those juke boxes in it that you could put money in it and play music, and they served alcohol and non-alcohol beverages. And we used to go there as teenagers to dance and on the weekend. So that was where we went. And we all went there. We were very sad, very disappointed, but we all went there later and met up there and just played music on the jukebox and drank whatever the beverage of our choice was, Coca-Cola, Knee-High Orange, or whatever it was that we could, order, because we were teenagers at the time.
And I do have to ask you about that traumatic moment when your home was attacked. It's such a frightening experience to live through.
Well, I think we started there in September of '66. We started at the white school, and it was because it was in the fall. It was in September, and I was sitting. Well, my dad was gone, and my brother Michael had ridden his bike up the road to our cousin's house. My mom was in the bedroom asleep, which was on the front of the house. There were 3 bedrooms on the front of the house. She was asleep in one. I had 2 brothers. My brothers Kenneth and Reginald were asleep in the second bedroom on the front of the house, and I was in the third bedroom on the front of the house studying. And I had the lamp light on, and there was a table near a window, and I noticed that a vehicle had stopped in the road in front of our house because I could see the lights. And so shortly after the vehicle stopped and I saw the red lights on the vehicle, the bullets, started coming into the house, exploding through the wall, shooting through the house. And I realized that somebody was shooting into the house. So I fell to the floor and covered my head instinctively and start crawling away from the front of the house towards a hallway. And once I got to the hallway, I realized that the bullets were flying through the hallway, because I could see the bullets flying through the hallway and the plaster, just exploding off of the wall where the bullets were coming through the front of the house, all the way through the hallway to the bathroom on the front, out the back of the house. So I started screaming, they're shooting in here, they're shooting in here, get down, they're shooting in here. And my 2 brothers were asleep. And I was afraid that they were going to wake up and sit up in the bed, because the bullets were flying through the room that they were in, as far as I could tell. And I was terrified that they were going to wake up and sit up and get hit by the bullets that were coming into their room. But thank God they never woke up. The whole thing happened before they even had a chance to wake up. My mother did wake up, and she ran out of her bedroom out into the kitchen and said, "What is all of that noise?" And I started screaming to her, get down, they're shooting in here, they're shooting in here. And of course I said they, because it seemed like 100 bullets were coming in through the house. And I just assumed that it sounded like more than one person was shooting, because there were so many bullets coming into the house. So my mom was like stunned. She was like trying to figure out, what are you talking about? She was just trying to make sense out of what I was saying, because she couldn't process it. She couldn't accept what I was saying as being the truth. So, because she was so stunned and in shock. So by that time, a bullet went through the kitchen wall where she was, and she just instinctively fell to the floor and, covered her head like I was doing. And, so shortly after that, everything went silent, and we were still down on the floor on our stomachs. We were afraid to move because we didn't know whether they were reloading to start the second round or not. But my brother who had biked up to my cousin's house, said that someone in a truck had approached him, had ordered him to come to the road, said, come here, boy, come here, boy. And my brother said, even though he was only 13, he just instinctively felt that his life was in danger. And he dropped his bike and ran to the back of my cousin's house, which was a field full of soybeans. And he ran out into that field, and the truck turned and headed back to our house. And that's when the shooting started. He heard the shooting from where he was. He was about a half mile from our house. So he waded back through the bean field, making his way back to our house, because he felt he couldn't walk in the road, that it would have been too dangerous, because he didn't know whether the man in the truck was going to come back and try to shoot him or not. So by the time he got home, the house was dark and silent. My mom and I were still on the floor with our heads covered, and he came through the back door and told us that it was him, who it was, that it was him. So we knew it was him coming into the house and not somebody coming in here to kill us. But I later found out as an adult that our neighbor across the road from us, who was also our cousin, was sitting on his porch, and he saw the whole thing. He saw it. And so when my dad asked him, who was it? He wouldn't tell my father who it was, because he knew that if he told my dad who it was, my dad was going to retaliate against this person who shot into our house. And he knew that we were going to end up without a father, and my mom without a husband, because during that time, surely my dad would have, if he had retaliated, he would have gone to prison, or he could have been lynched, by a white mob, for all we know. So he went to his grave with that information and never told my dad who it was. The sheriff came out, the FBI came out, but no one was ever arrested. And my dad said, told the FBI that if anybody comes back out here shooting, I'm going to defend my family. I'm going to shoot back. And the FBI's response was, well, if you shoot back and you kill anybody or hurt anybody, you're going to jail. So, so we knew that it wasn't good, even though, our family was attacked, that even if my dad had tried to defend us, and even if he knew who it was and he had gone to that person and retaliated, that the law would not have been on his side, that, our family would have been destroyed.
And there's no doubt in your mind that this attack was because you and your brother had started going to that white school.
No, I don't know that was the reason. We don't, of course, we don't really know why they attacked us. We have speculated that about who the person was and why they did it, because my brother think that it was a kid that he had gotten into a fight with, at school, and he went home and told his father, and his father, was the one who came to our house and shot into our house. That's what my brother speculated, but the honest truth is we really don't know, why it was done.
Did you hesitate to go back? Did you think at the time, maybe I've made the wrong decision, I should go back to the other school?
No, that never occurred to us. We never I never thought that that it was something meant to scare us and get us to leave. And even if it was, we weren't going to leave or go back, you know, to the Patton Lane High School, which was the black high school that we left. So we were going to. It's funny, during that whole time, given all that we endured and had to experience, it just never occurred to me or anybody in my family to like leave and to go back. We just weren't raised to be quitters, and or to give up or to give in. And once we committed to something, we felt that it was our duty to see it through. And I think that's something that we had a value we had internalized from our parents, even though we didn't realize it at the time, because we were all very tenacious, very determined, very persistent in all that we undertook in life. You know, no matter how difficult it got, we never gave up and we never gave in and we never quit. We always finished, you know, whatever we started, we finished.
Did your dad quickly repair all the damage caused by the bullets?
No, our house became like a monument to that shooting. I mean, it was like he left all the gaping holes in the wall where all the bullets had gone. It stayed there. It stayed there for years. And I remember coming home from college one year after I had graduated from high school and gone to college. And I came home and I was looking, and the holes were still in the wall, and they were up in the ceiling and in the bathroom. And I said, Mama, Daddy, you know you can repair this. You know, you can like replaster this. You can like cover this up, you know, and fix it. It was like a monument. Our house had become a monument to that shooting. And they just left everything just like it was for years. And you know, the thing I most regret is that no one, neither I nor anyone in my family, took photographs of that. We never photographed it. And I regret that. I regret that because we just, you know, it's our story. It's just an oral transmission of what happened. We don't have, you know, any photographs of it.
It seems like that would be such a traumatic thing for a young person like yourself to live through, and then to see evidence of it as a perpetual reminder every day. Do you feel like that incident caused any psychological harm to you, PTSD?
None that I can think of. Now, my sister, who was younger than I, she has what I would consider PTSD. She was affected very differently than the rest of us. She was the youngest, and I think she was very traumatized, you know, by all of what she experienced. And it, to this day, I think she carries the trauma, you know, of that event and of that experience of having had to go over to that school by herself, and she felt that she was unprotected, and she never came home and talked about it with my parents, and she was never able to say, you know, what happened at school today. And so she pretty much felt like they abandoned her and just kind of left her out there on her own. And so she does have what I would consider evidence of having had a very traumatic experience and signs of PTSD.
No child should have to go through that trying to get an
No, but I don't know of any of my other siblings that seem to have affected in the way that it affected her.
Did you go back to any high school reunions, 25th, 50th, and confront any of these kids?
Well, that's another story. We were never invited back. They had class reunions, but we never got invited back until our 40th class reunion. For the first time, we received a invitation to the 40th class reunion, 40 years after we graduated. And we did, there were 5 of us who went back for the first time in 40 years. And I thought that it would be an opportunity for us to really explore what happened to us, you know, what that experience was like. So I wanted everybody to come and to talk about that experience, all the Black students. And so we did, I convinced everybody to come back several days before we went to the class reunion of the integrated class, and for us to actually document that story of what our experience was like going up there and having to go through that. And they all agreed. And I was lucky enough to find a professor at Barnett College, Professor Leanne Bell. I had called her actually to ask if could use her material. She had developed some material which ultimately became a book called Storytelling for Social Justice. And I found her information on the internet. And I thought, well, this will be useful to us in helping us to figure out how to capture our story. So I called her and asked her for permission to use it. And during that conversation, she became very interested in what we were doing. And she asked if she could be a part of it. And it was 2 weeks before we were supposed to get together. So that's my husband who just came in. I was letting him know. I should have put a sign on the door. But she asked if she could be a part of it. So I said, well, wow, it's just 2 weeks before the event. I don't know how I'm going to tell the other students, you know, that you want to come. I can say that you can come, but I don't know if they want you to come. So I said, well, I'll invite you on my behalf. Then I'll let them know that I'm inviting you and ask them if that's okay. So I let them know that I was inviting her, that she wanted to be a part of our storytelling event, because that was a part of her academic specialty. And she was able to do something that she said she'd never been able to do. She applied for a grant to pay for her to come down and to hire a sound person and a videographer to come with her. And they came. She was able to do that in 2 weeks to get that grant. So they did come, and we all met at a small community center there, all the African-American students. And we spent the whole day there just telling the story of what that experience was like for us. And she captured it all on video. And she felt that it was important for the for the story to be balanced, and for the white students to tell what their experience was like. So when we went to the prom, 40 years after having graduated from high school, having been invited for the first time, we I invited her to come with me as my guest to the prom so she could talk to the white students and ask them if they would be willing to meet with her to tell their side of it. So she came, and they immediately identified her as somebody who didn't belong there, of course. Who is she? Why is she here? What does she want? You know, and so I explained to them who she was. And at that prom, I did see a lot of the people who had really hassled us and gave us a hard time, and some of them who had not given us a hard time. But one person in particular made his way over to our table and sat down and said, you know, I want to extend my apologies for not for what I did to you all, but for what I didn't do. You know, when people were treating you badly and saying, disrespectful, unkind things to you, I was silent. I didn't say anything. And, you know, I wish that I had the courage to speak up and to say something, and I didn't do it. And then there were others, I'm told, who our other classmates confronted them and said to their spouses, they were terrible. They were awful to us. They were just terrible. And the person, of course, was embarrassed and said, well, I've changed. I'm not like that now. You know, I'm a different person than I was then, you know, and still there were other people at the prom who were like just as clannish and cliquish as they were in high school. You know, they sat only with the people that they knew in high school. They talked only to them, and, you know, they looked at us, observed us from a distance, but they never came, you know, over and said anything, not even hello. You know, they were behaving really the same way they did in high school, you know. So, but there were some who did, you know, one guy in particular who did apologize. And Professor Bell was able to go on and get some of them to agree to meet with her. And they were able to tell what that experience was like for them. And then we all came together. It took her 3 years. This was a 3-year project working with us. We all came together. We all viewed the videotape of what each one of us had said. And then we all came together and, you know, had well, she brought us together. We all viewed the videotape together. We had not heard what the other side had said. We didn't know what the white kids had said, white classmates had said. They didn't know what we had said. But she brought us together and showed us what each one had said. And then we all had a dialogue about that, you know, discussing our perceptions, our misperceptions, regrets, you know, how we had been harmed, and apologies that were too late, you know. So that happened, you know, and so that was a good thing, you know.
As we wrap up, you know, bringing it back to the present day, so many of these issues from the 60s remain with us. The challenges that you faced and folks trying to vote in the South are facing those same kinds of challenges today. I know you've spoken to many groups and worked with young people. Do you have any words of advice or maybe lessons from the time that you can pass along to young people who maybe face the same kinds of prejudice, the same types of racism that you faced almost 60 years ago?
Well, all I can say is freedom is a constant struggle for Black people. You know, freedom is a constant struggle. And as long as we, you know, these things it's always difficult, you know, to know what to say to other people who are coming behind you. I feel sad that I even have to offer this kind of advice, you know. But I guess what I would say, if I have to say something, to use a quote from Frantz Fanon, you know, and it's sad that I'm having to use his quote even. Each generation must, out of relative obscurity, find their mission, fulfill it, or betray it. And I think that maybe the mission for young white kids is that they need to help, they need to work to dismantle these the system of white supremacy. And they need to do the work in their own communities. They need to start with white people, talking to them about racism and how deadly it is for not just Black people, but for white people too. I mean, I have signed up for a webinar later today. I can't remember whether it's Cornell or Vanderbilt that's offering a webinar on dying of whiteness, because white people are dying from racism, white supremacy too. And for Black kids, I would just say, our Black young people, I would say freedom is a constant struggle. You know, we have to continue to fight until we are free, and until we do have access to all of the rights of citizens of this country. And we don't have that now. It's always tenuous. It's always predicated on who is the president, who's in Congress, how they feel about Black people, who's on the Supreme Court. You know, all of our rights seem to be just one election. All of our rights that we have seem to be hanging in the balance of the next election and who gets elected. So I would just say people have to continue to fight and work and commit themselves to doing this work, this hard work of trying to make sure that America lives up to everything that it has said on paper. Lofty ideas, but as many people said, this America is an experiment, and the experiment has not been fully successful at this point.
Well, ma'am, it has been an honor talking with you today. I am so appreciative to you for your time, and also for sharing your story online, which is what connected us in the first place. It's so important to document stories like yours so that they are able to inform and inspire young people today and in the future. So thank you very much.
Well, I do hope it inspires people to take action.